Hi, I'm Cody.
And I'm Brent.
And we are the Hugonauts, here to review and discuss for you the best science fiction novels of all time. This week, we are excited. We are reviewing Three Body Problem and the associated trilogy, The Remembrance of Earth's Past, or the Three Body Problem trilogy. We are joined by our guest, Adam McMurchie. Next week, make sure you like, subscribe if you're watching us on YouTube, or download, follow if you're just listening. We will be discussing Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, which I am very excited to talk about. So let's get into Three Body Problem. Brent, want to kick us with a summary?
Yeah, for sure. So Three Body Problem, the first book, 400 pages, 13 and a half hours on audiobook. They get progressively longer throughout the trilogy, as often happens. The third one is up to 600 pages and 29 hours on audiobook. And the general setup is that the book starts with a heartbreaking story of Ye Wenjie, a young woman who is trying to survive the Cultural Revolution. And unfortunately, she watches in horror as her parents, who are prominent scientists, are persecuted and tortured, and she's labeled a political enemy of the state. Then we jump to the near future, where we explore the world through the eyes of Wang Miao. Doctor and lots of prominent scientists are committing suicide. There's super strange scientific results happening. And a countdown starts appearing in his vision, in the photographs he's taking. Lots of impossible things seem to be happening, but they're definitely happening. And simultaneously, he gets brought into these meetings where representatives of governments from around the world are all working together against some outside enemy. And the back of the book actually reveals a lot more than that, but we're just going to leave you with one final thought, which is this is a book about first contact, but a different kind of first contact than you have ever read about before. It is so different and so interesting. And then the other two books, which we'll not talk about the plot so much so as not to spoil anything, but in general, those are a continuation of humanity's future over the following enormous period of time, with so many years that you would go through and so many more tech ideas that come up. But anyway, we'll get into all that a little bit.
And if you'd like to interact with us, come find us on social media. We're across all platforms, and we launched it as a way to be able to talk with more people about sci-fi and its prose element. This week, we're excited to be joined by a guest. His name, as I said before, is Adam McMurchie. He's an AI tech guy who's run software projects all around the world, has an academic background in physics, and is also a fluent Mandarin speaker, and has spent 10 years off and on in China. So, Adam, welcome to the program.
Happy to be here.
Adam, we like to, if we have people just kind of give a little background on science fiction and why they got into it. Can you give us your favorite sci-fi idea? What's your favorite idea you've seen in sci-fi?
Well, that's a good question. What seems to be more hot these days, and it's a topic that's kind of always resonates with me, is this idea of multiple dimensions, because it's right on the absolute cutting edge of our knowledge at the moment, and we're not even sure what they might look like or what they are. And I think in modern science fiction, and even older science fiction from as far back as 100 years ago, is looking at the different ways the authors use that as a mechanism to do world building. And obviously no spoiler alerts here, but is a theme that Liu Cixin, the author, plays with quite a lot in his books. I think that for me is one of the most attractive themes, because there's so much scope for progressing a plot in multiple different ways that you could just being stuck to three dimensions. And also you've got the whole aspect of how characters react. And you can essentially use it as almost like an infinite sort of resource for generating plot. So yeah, for me that's an absolute classic.
Sure. Well,
the multi-dimensional plot.
Yeah, we'll have to call you when we're doing Blake Crouch Dark Matter. But anyway, yeah, thank you again for coming on the show. It's been
And
so wonderful, meeting you and getting to interact with you about talk about sci-fi stuff. This is the podcast has just been such a fun way to meet lots of cool people who are thinking about cool ideas all over the world. So
Pleasure.
Anyway, yeah, thanks for joining us.
So with that said, should we do a little review of Three Body and Dark Forest and Death's End here real quick?
Yeah, let's do it. I am going to give Three Body a 4 out of 5. It's got such an incredible mystery. Like several mysteries that are all sort of coming together at once. Super propulsive plot. The end of the book I didn't care for as much. Started to get into some sort of, in my mind, like magical science, and that kind of happens more and more in the sequels. So for me, I did not like the sequels as much. Dark Forest, I'd give a 2 or 3 out of 5, and Death's End, I'm just gonna give it a 1. I really didn't like Death's End, but the first book I absolutely loved, and I think everyone should read. So anyway, that's me.
I forgot what episode I did it in, but I'm going to put the boo sound effect back in. I still have it. I still have the crowd booing in the assets folder. That's going back in there. I gave Three Body a 4 out of 5. I think that while the characters, which we'll talk about all this, but while the characters seem a little flat, most of them at least, and can all feel kind of like the same person, the concepts are just so novel that Liu Cixin has come up with, and they're well described and explored, and it makes it a must read for me. The second Dark Forest I rated 3 out of 5, and Death's End 3 out of 5. I thought they were worth reading too, but there's a lot of content there. He really just is smacking through ideas.
Yeah.
Adam, what do you think?
I think for me, I'm going to go a little bit out the boat here and say, I know 5 out of 5 is generally reserved for the absolute legends, but I think this deserves it, and simply for the size of the impact. So I think like overall, it gets a 5 out of 5. But that said, it's not without its flaws. So I think like book 2 and book 3, I would give them like 4.5 or 4 because of poor pacing. In terms of the pacing side of things, I think there is a bit of flat characters as well, but overall the story generation and the constant creation of new dimensions of plot to explore kind of merits that 5 out of 5, and simply the impact that it's had culturally over the world and China in specific. So yeah, I think I have to do that, but it's not without its flaws.
For sure.
Great. Well, yeah, there's a reason we invited you to do this episode with us. Adam has been a champion of the podcast and very kind to us. So, and he wanted to do Three Body. So we're psyched to have you here.
Awesome.
So should we talk about the plot? I mean, it's that we all agree that's the secret sauce here. I mean, what did you guys like so much about this?
So I think like for me, one of the sort of main parts of the plot was like in the first book, I had no idea it was coming. So when I read the first book, like some of the things that just popped out of nowhere, like for 1 minute I thought I was reading history, and then all of a sudden there's all of these wacky ideas coming left, right, and center. And the ability to build suspense from just science alone, I think that's what made it so attractive to me. So I think like that area was just, it was a constant driver that, they use the term page turner, right? And for some people it's character, some people it's world building. But for me, I think the science here and like that constant tease of mystery kind of wanted you to just turn the extra page to figure out, okay, how is he going to explain this, or how, what's going to happen? And I think that for me was what kind of really made it
he
special.
has this way of really hiding his playbook along the way, right? He like really shields the mystery well, and because in a lot of novels you get you can kind of, you start to pick up on hints that the author's dropping, some foreshadowing, and if there's a twist or the climax of the mystery, what the anticipation builds to. In a lot of novels, you're kind of like, oh, I think I know what's going to happen. You either know what's going to happen, you think you know what's going to happen. There's some element of that. I think that Cixin really keeps you in the dark and then gets you all at once with something that's really pretty simple and well described, and like you said, scientific based, normally science based mystery, and you're like, oh my god, I got this thing all at once, and there's this effect of getting the idea hitting you, which is really cool. The idea is exploring and the twist of the plot, and I thought that was incredible, especially in Three Body Problem, and also in 2 in Dark Forest. It hit me pretty hard too.
Yeah, the dark forest idea, which we won't spoil. Y'all should, read these and find out what the dark forest means. But holy hell, what an idea! The dark forest is a crazy thought experiment. The only thing I would add to what you guys had to say is the Cultural Revolution stuff in the first book in Three Body it's what the book starts with, and it is to me as a Westerner. I've heard of the the Cultural Revolution in China, but I didn't have a deep, intimate understanding of what that meant. And this book, you don't always expect sci-fi books are gonna, teach you things about new parts of the world. It sets up and introduces the most important character in the book, shows you what her past was like, and it was just such an unbelievable. It was almost seemed otherworldly. Like imagining that happening is just so wild, and could not wait to see what was going to happen to Ye Wenjie. So anyway, yeah,
I think there's you can see from the author, he's like really strong academic background, and so from us Westerners, we're picking up a lot about the Chinese history and ways of thinking. And likewise, though, I mean, there's a lot of stuff like I didn't know about, like a lot of like the references he makes about Western history, or the way he sort of even describes like the UN to like every minute detail, or like later on like parts of Norway, and you're like, wow, this dude really has done his research, right? And so I think like it's rare that you get an author that has such a broad and in-depth knowledge of so many different things, and that's why maybe later on for the gotchas, like it can be a bit information overload, because there's so much angles to this, and I think that's what makes it slightly different as well. It's like for me, it feels like an international book as much as it does a Chinese book, and that's kind of reflected in its global success.
There's even medieval like historical pieces in I think the beginning of Detson, the third one, and then there's some tales that feel like they're drawn on like regular fairy tales around the world, and specifically from like an Arabic tradition, and so he's clearly just interested in everything.
Yeah. So should we talk about the characters a little bit, maybe?
Yeah, I was gonna say, Ye Wenjie, there's a reason we are latching on a lot to her, and it's because she's really fleshed out. But I think Brent, you may want to take this one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, she is incredible, and the reason I think she's so incredible is she makes a very important decision in this first book that I'm not going to spoil for you, but it's a decision that you almost can't imagine anyone making, except it makes total sense for her to have done this after you see what her life was like and what she's gone through. And that to me made her such an incredible character. Unfortunately, she's somewhat alone. I think a good counterpoint to her is the other main character of Three Body Problem, Wang Miao. He is this physicist, or whatever, he's a researcher. In any case, his wife and kids are mentioned at the beginning, and he's sort of interacting with them. But then after like page 100, they're just not ever mentioned again, not by the author, but also not by Wang. He seems to have like forgotten that he has a wife and kids. And so that I think is just a good sort of example of a lot of the rest of the characters throughout the series, where they just don't seem to be doing the things that real people tend to do. They're a little more flat, and they're just sort of objects to take the plot forward.
Plot vehicles. Yeah, plot vehicles.
Yeah, I kind of like a little bit disagree. I think it's kind of perspective, right? Like I know where it's coming from. I think it's because if this was any other book, and you took Ye Wenjie out of the book, we would all automatically raise the amount of dimensionality the other characters have. I think it's just she's so well fleshed out that everybody else seems kind of like insignificant. And then, book 2, book 3, with Luoji and Yun Tianming, I think they're they try to replace her, but not as in such a level. So you kind of get this constant feeling of like, wow, this character's so fleshed out, but everything after seems like an afterthought. But I think that's only perspective. I think overall, these characters, some of them, they do have desires and wishes, and they do have plot arcs. I mean, especially Wade. I mean, there's some pretty crazy stuff there. But I think overall, like, if you're right, if I was to compare this to, say, a standard sci-fi book off the shelf, it might seem a little bit more flat. And I think there's also a cultural interpretation as well. Like, we often, like in the West, imbue characters with a large amount of personality. It kind of gives us something to grip onto in detail. And I think, it's something that might change in the future. Like, we might drift towards more sort of sterile personalities, but like maybe deep reserves of other things, of like desires and things that are more slowly eased out of the character. And I think that's what we saw with Yun Tianming, right? Like, the person almost felt like a snail to begin with, in terms of like the way the plot was drawn out from him. But towards the end, things started to change, and the opinions of the characters start to change. I think it's maybe, I wouldn't say like totally flat, but I think maybe comparatively flat to what we're used to, I think is maybe a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So it's a cultural translation issue as well as
yeah. I think there's perhaps a bit of that. I think there's a few dimensions there. I say I think cultural is one of them. Another one is like, it's almost like, if you see a football team and there's one amazing player, and then that amazing player gets all of the attention, and then when you look at the other players, like, meh, they're okay. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. It's kind of a bit like that.
Yeah, that's a very positive interpretation. I like that. So what about the science and tech? I mean, there's so much of that happening. I mean, Cody, do you want to hit us with just like the crazy list of ideas that come through here?
Why don't you list them off?
Oof, there's so many. Okay, all right. Okay, we got nanomaterials and carbon nanotubes are like super important. There's this super advanced video game where you can seemingly like do and say anything you would do in the real world. The NPCs act like real people. There's a haptic feedback suit, so it even feels like you're there. Tons of astronomy, how stars work, astronomical distances. There's quantum entanglement. You've got these objects made out of just strong force interaction that are like otherworldly construction. Leans super hard into string theory and multidimensionality, which I think we'll talk about a little bit more, but I'll just leave that there for now. And yeah, that's the tip of the iceberg. But like, man, he's really going. There's so many ideas in here. You get so much depth on all of them.
He also goes into like tons of detail on each of these things. Each of these things is really, really fleshed out. Like, he cares about everything and he describes how it works, which is really fun to explore. One of my favorite examples was the beginning of Dark Forest, where there's a euthanasia machine that the government has instituted in China, and to use the machine, you must answer a series of questions like, do you really want to die? Do you want to kill yourself? But instead of yes and no buttons, it's 1 through 10, and it changes each time. So it's like 5 for no, 3 for yes, 1 for no, 6 for yes, so that you have to think about each time you're making an answer, which I thought was an incredible invention. And it alone could support like a sci-fi short story. And it's just like, man, there's that, and there's this, and there's that.
Yeah, I have to agree there. It feels like, I think that, I can't remember who had mentioned it, but something like, generally a good sci-fi book has 3 gems or 3 to 4 gems of like technological, revelations or ideas, whereas this kind of feels like each book has like 25 and it feels like you just keep getting hit with them, and that's what makes it so, if you're a techie guy, it's almost like each one's like a dopamine hit, and you're like, as you're going through the detail, you're like, you can feel yourself enjoying it, and then just as it like plateaus, another one comes. So it kind of feels like it's like a constant stream of ideas. For me, I think the hibernation one, the hibernation machine.
We totally forgot that one. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they can hibernate for very long periods of time. They can make themselves go to sleep whenever they want. Yeah. Good call.
But there's also a lot more. There's like what there isn't in a lot of other sci-fi about hibernation. Like it's usually generational ship stuff. Here you have the impact on society, and it's like what it would mean. Like if people want to wake up in a better future, then the people who have to build that future for them have to just stay and do the hard work to get them there. Like what's the impact of that? What's the implication? And he really cares about not only the hard science, but the soft science as well, and is always applying the new technology to what that means for the direction of society and humanity as a whole, and what it means for all classes.
Yeah, for sure.
And that I think is incredible here. I think, Brent, you had something though that was about
yeah, I do have a quibble. I got to be the negative guy. So some of the most important plot points in the book rely on some sort of like applications and thought experiments of like string theory and multidimensionality. And two things are happening here that made me a little bit crazy. So one, to like pretend I'm a scientist, which I am not, but in general, it's really appearing these days like string theory is not true. It's still not disproven yet, but we keep doing experiments that seem like they maybe should reveal some part of string theory, and they keep not doing it. So it's still not impossible, but it's not looking like it's right. The other thing that happens, and the thing that I think, if I'm being honest with myself, is why it rubbed me the wrong way, is he's using those ideas to come up with technological ideas that are so advanced that they feel like magic, basically, to me. And so I think my subconscious was like rejecting them as actual ways the universe could work, which because they were sort of the most important things that were used to advance some of the conclusions of the books, particularly the later books. I think that's part of why those later books, especially like the end of the third book, there's a bunch of those things that happen in a row right at the end of the third book where I was like, well, come on, what are we doing here? So anyway, that's my one quibble with some of the science and tech stuff, was a lot of the physics. He was playing at the very sort of edges of what seemed like might be true. And to his credit, it's, a lot of that evidence that maybe those things aren't true has come out in the last 10 to 15 years after sort of the first book was written. But anyway, that's how things struck me.
Yeah, I think my criticism, like my major quibble, is the book is heavily long form. And so, like, if you like everything, then you'll like the book, right? But not everybody likes everything. And because his style is long form, and the things that I don't like, there's just constant detail. Like, I mean, to be honest, like the fairy tales, there's there's like this in the book. There's like this triple layered metaphor. There's a story within a story within a story, right? And that, to me, like, I was hoping, like, okay, they're talking about a story. It's going to be 2 pages, and it's like page, like the 20th page, 25th page, and I'm like, when is this going to end? So I think like the part of the issue is like, if you are generally into everything, like people, plots, characters, and science, then you'll love it because you just get detail for everything. But if there are some things which turn you off, then because he covers everything, there's going to be chunks in the book where you kind of like roll in your eyes trying to move along. So I think that for me might have, just the long form nature might make it a bit harder for those who want to jump in.
And by long form nature, of course, you mean like just long, very detail oriented. And I it's funny you say that because I loved that section of the third book, Death's End, the fairy tale structure. I loved that reprieve from, right. I like hearing about science, but I liked the little story reprieve. So for me, that really worked. And I think you're right that like everyone can get something different and like different pieces of it because there's just so much explored. I also think that, and to your point, Brent, the magic kind of worked for me. I feel like he explained right up to what we know about the edges of science and then used that to then make his own new idea about what could be possible. And I really like that bend to science fiction. I like the, like, if it's really well explained up to the point, then imagining the next step, since we can't actually prove it, you have to make something up. What's a great example is the end of Interstellar, when it's like love is a particle that exists in the universe. Sorry if I'm ruining Interstellar for anybody, but you've had your chance. And that kind of stuff for me, like personally, I could get on board with the fantasy at the end of the road a little bit.
Interesting. Okay.
So the world in general is a little bit bleak. His world, his view of humanity and the earth and
we're
our
not
future.
doing well. Nobody's doing well. Everything is horrible. Yeah. So that's one of the themes. There's a lot of there's environmental degradation. Humanity is very cruel, as is everyone else in the universe. There's an idea. He has this idea of the dark forest, which we won't spoil. And he didn't invent it, but he popularized it. And it is a very cool, important idea. And it is very bleak and not nice to think about. There's just a lot of, I guess the last thing we'll say on that is that he has a lot of shifting. Morality is very fluid throughout these books in a way that I think is really interesting. And Adam, you actually had a really good sort of take on that. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
There's a lot that reflects our current culture, right? Globally as well. It's not just China, but the rest of the world, where today's heroes are tomorrow's villains, and likewise today's villains are tomorrow's heroes. And I think what we see in the book, this constant as sort of Cody mentioned, how he has this ability to hide things from us, and as you're going through the story, there's people that you would think are your traditional heroes, which very quickly descend into villainy and tyranny, and then back to being heroes. But actually, it shows them as just being normal people. What's actually changing is the perspective of society as they change, and I think this is kind of it's very typical of the author to take a perspective which is kind of hyper cynical view on modern society. So it's less there is no such thing as a stable morals or stable values. They actually more like a slider, and you get to explore that in each generation as because we have this ability with the hibernation machine as well. You actually get to see individuals as they're perceived through different times while they're still alive. So rather than say, in the UK, I think, for example, Churchill's now slowly becoming villainized. It's quite, there's a lot of push to learn more about what Churchill really did. But if he was still alive today, that would be a massively different situation. And I think that's what makes the magic sauce, right? So it's not just people's opinions change because they're in different times. It's the fact that their opinions change of great figures who are actually alive today, and they've maybe just come out of a time machine, out of this machine, and they think everybody's going to come and wave and hug them, and then instead there's stones being thrown and vice versa. So I think this is it's like a dynamic exploration of that in real time. So that kind of worked for me.
I think we have a tendency to as humans think about morality as black and white, and it's like a physical law of the universe. Something is moral, something is amoral. Those are truths, and really we don't admit frequently to ourselves that it's a fiction we create to make society work. Morality is something we all agree upon.
Kind of super echoes history, right? I mean, we see that even now. I think that's one of the things what made it believable for me. I hear the magic part can be a little bit too much for somebody, but I think what made it believable
not for me.
Yeah, right, exactly. but right, and so I think different perspectives, but from my perspective, that was one of the things that really kind of resonated with me, because it just felt so true. My objective experience of how I was perceived, we're all like that. We all have our own arcs in our own minds, and we judge ourselves based, sometimes based on social opinion, and that social opinion can change so rapidly today. I think that was one of the things maybe I've not seen in many other books before, because we'll maybe might get to that to the end. There is maybe one other book that might cover that in our recommendations.
Oh, a teaser. You're not as good as hiding your hand as Cixin. So I think it's also interesting if we talk about again going back to like the cultural translation, not the literal lingual translation, but to talk about the author a little bit, to talk about Cixin. Adam, can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I think looking at the author, one of the things that made him so good in this domain was he's got such a strong academic, well studied background, but he was also just an engineer. And I think if we look at some of the best, my favorite authors today of sci-fi authors, most of them work in tech and IT, and Liu Cixin is he's no exception. And I think if you look at the history, so Liu Cixin had been writing books for many years, and this was just one of the first ones to really take off. Right now in the America and the UK, you can buy all of his previous books. There's been some absolute classics that didn't quite make it to the gates of popularity. So I think Liu Cixin has been in the industry for a long time, and he's clearly influenced by his technical background. His growth, because he's in his sort of mid-50s, he's got some exposure to the Cultural Revolution and a perspective from China, but he's educated enough to give a Western spin on things as well. But that said, Liu Cixin is definitely not without his criticisms, I think, in China. His books have maybe not been as popular among certain demographics. There has, been accusations of sexism in his writing, and I think that's quite clear. There's some aspects which are a little bit on the nose, and I think we should definitely sort of flag that out. And I think in China he's addressed that a few times as well in interviews. But overall, I think as a writer, he's definitely flawed. And definitely not, from in China, their main, some of their main sci-fi review forums kind of say something along the lines of he's an amazing story writer, but less of a literature expert. And so it's more if you like reading stories, good stories, if you like ideas, that's definitely the book for you. But if you're looking for a War and Peace, maybe not so much.
Right, which is funny because he has a whole section at the beginning of the second book, Dark Forest, where he talks about how to write a character. His characters talk about how to write a good literary character, and he's like, "Well, he gets it, but I'm not seeing it." And specifically to that section, is that's one of the best probably examples of the sexism in his writing. It's clearly got some issues writing women. One of the characters, Luo Jin in Dark Forest, he imagines a perfect woman who is basically just like a baby, sexy baby. And that's it. And then she turns out to be real, and it's just really flat and feels farcical. Or there's a scene that they keep coming back to, Brent, you were mentioning, in the third book, one of the characters in the third book, of how her humanity is continuously brought up with this memory she has of a woman holding her baby. And it's that's what women like, babies.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely, as I was reading, there was definitely several times where I was like, oh, okay, that's what we're doing now. This wouldn't fly in America. And it sounds like it's also kind of, those parts aren't flying so well in China these days either, which is a good thing. So I want to talk about the sequels and sort of generally the full trilogy. And Cody, you've coined an amazing term that I really like that applies to this one.
Oh, you want me to say it? I was going to drink some water. I'm calling it the publisher's trilogy. And that's when you see a really good first book in a series. It happens in TV and movies too. And then it feels like they spent years and years and years honing this thing. And then the other one, they signed a book deal for the first one and the publishing company wants them to make 2 follow-ups immediately while the public is still interested, and so they write the next two in a year each or 2 years each or whatever. And you can feel that here. The books go from, the book goes double in length in the second one, and then the third one's even longer. It feels like he's just writing and writing and writing and not looking back. And there's a lot of organization and stuff in Three Body Problem, the first of the trilogy. There's a lot of organizational and like writing principles that he's used that don't appear in the second and third book, and it's clear he had less time to do them. You see it. Yeah, it's all over the place, but I'm calling it the publisher's trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it enough times. Yeah, I'm happy you've given it a name because we keep seeing it. It happens so much, that some authors, they're working so hard. They've got this great idea. They write a book. Suddenly, like millions of people buy the book, and the publisher comes to them and writes such a big check and says, like, cool, here's all this money, but you got to do it in 1 year. And it turns out you can't make as good a product in 1 year as you can in 5. So, yep.
We can also call it here the alternative for this specific situation was the 3-novel problem.
That's right.
Which is
Brilliant.
But yeah, the publisher's trilogy.
Yeah.
I have to call out, though, that I slightly disagree in this one instance. I agree with the idea, but in this instance, for me, the second book was the gem that the other two were wrapped around. So I kind of I buy into the idea, but I think for me in this case, again, just because of my preferences to sort of science and detail, I found the second one blew my mind, and the first one blew my mind, but less so, and then the third one even less. So I kind of found the second book is the core gem to that. But I do take that there's more filler. I think objectively speaking, there seems to be more filler in book 2 and book 3. So there may be some truth to that.
Yeah, for sure. So
and people clearly love it. Can we talk about, because I mean, you told us about this, we had no idea about it. Can we talk about its impact in China?
Yeah, so I mean, in China, the and the world, actually. So it's really important to mention that. So one thing that's is to show it's not just China is that Amazon put in $1 billion bid to buy Three Body Problem to do a TV series, and then I think Netflix got it.
It's Netflix now, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, like $1 billion for a series is a big thing, and the book, I think it sold like 12 million copies or something like that. But in China, there's a common phrase which is Three Body Problem opened the door to science fiction to China, and I think possibly wider Asia as well. I think that the impact has been heavy. I mean, it's so big that even the actual sciences, the development, there are fusion reactors named after Liu Cixin. There are like space projects. You can see from the engineers like that I talked to, a lot of their like idea generation is hugely impacted by him. Whereas I kind of think that this is going to be a really big transformation on China's development, because there's so much ideas that inspired and excited people there, and now the thing has ballooned, and there's anime, there's movies, there's spin-off novels, there's everything. And I think impact wise we could be saying it's the China's Star Wars for sure. I think that's a fair statement to make.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, that's good to know. And what about the other thing that I'm super curious to ask you, something that you've actually been able to experience? Did you notice differences between the original Chinese versions and the translated versions? Are there things that changed between them or felt different?
Yeah, so in the Chinese version, I think some of the biggest differences is like there's been several editions of the English version, and if you get the latest version on Kindle, you'll find at the end of each chapter there's it's one of the first books that I've ever read where at the end of each chapter there's like 20 citations. And so when you go through it, you can click on them and it'll explain all of the historical references. And so there are certain words and phrases that don't translate because they're so culturally relative to what's going on in China or maybe in Asia in the wider part. So I think there's like a difference in I think the translation, if I remember, was done by Ken Liu.
1 and 3 were Ken Liu, and 2 was Joel Martinson.
Right.
So Ken Liu, one of my favorites. I love him. He's a great sci-fi author.
Yeah, and I think there's one other thing, like in the Chinese books, which only came out in the later English translations, was Liu Cixin has this awesome thing that I really like, where in his books he references characters and events from other books. So Dinghy and Ball Lightning. So I don't know if you read the version where they mention Ball Lightning, but in the first books it wasn't mentioned. But in the later books they started to bring in all of these other ideas that he had put in, and it's because those books weren't yet translated in English. So as the other versions come out, those other books you can now buy Ball Lightning from the store, and you can buy Supernova Era and things like that. And so the later versions have those included. So there's even if you really love the book, learn Mandarin and then read the book again, because you'll get more. So it's almost like, but there are stuff in the Western book which is slightly different as well. Specifically, the ordering of certain events is slightly different.
Oh,
yeah, and there's.
Why do you think they would order events differently in a translation? That seems interesting to me.
If I remember, I mean, I'll need to double check, but I remember one certain instance, the translator and the author had a slight disagreement, and then the publisher came in and said, we think for a Western audience, we would like to do it this way, because if I remember correctly, the part on the Cultural Revolution comes later in the Chinese version. It's so hard because I've read so many versions now, but there's different orders. And I think what happened was the author he was quite flexible. He said, yeah, that makes total sense. And cede, sort of like the cede it to you to make the right decision. But I think for us, it was so more relevant for us in the Western audience that don't understand the Cultural Revolution to read that first, rather than, because I have it being an assumed knowledge
to get context for it.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So shall we wrap this baby up?
Yeah. I mean, this is a beast. Take on this trilogy. If, as Adam said earlier, to use your language, if you can take on relentless tech talk and ideas, it really just keeps coming at you. And if you're into hard science fiction, this is for you. And if you're not into hard science fiction, you'll almost certainly still enjoy Three Body Problem, and there's something for everyone in the rest of the trilogy as well. It's a fantastic and very new feeling addition to the genre.
Yeah, and if you are, however you're listening, if you could leave us a review on your podcast app of choice, or give us a like and a comment on YouTube, would really appreciate it. Show's been growing a lot, but that is, it turns out, one of the number one ways people find podcasts is the podcast apps recommending them. So we gotta let the podcast app know you like it. So please do that and help us get more people reading great sci-fi.
Absolutely. All right. So last segment, like we always do. What are some recommendations? Adam, you had a couple?
Yeah.
Let's have you go first.
I think for those, probably the Asimov Foundation series. One of the main reasons is just because if you like stories that go through eons and different sort of time cultural changes, then this is definitely for you. I think also, like, in general, if you're more just like into the idea of sort of high detail stories, then Legends of the Galactic Heroes is definitely one to look at. It's considered a classic, and both of these are referenced in his book. So I think the author has been hugely influenced by both of them. So I think they're quite relevant.
Cool. Yeah, I'll recommend Children of Time, which I picked because it has a lot of the same feeling of sort of humanity's not making great decisions in Children of Time either. So fun, really fun read, but also a little bleak. So anyway, yeah, that's my rec. What about you, Cody?
My recommendation is House of Suns by Alastair Reynolds. It's a little more like interest in the characters and the plot, but it is also really interesting, a lot of really interesting science fiction ideas that are delved into in great detail in House of Suns, and it feels like something you'd like to read if you liked Three Body, and vice versa. So that's my recommendation. Those are theirs. And Adam, we thank you so much for your support of the podcast and for being on it with us.
Absolute pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well,
all right.
Keep
Later,
reading, everybody.
guys.
See ya.
Thanks.